Hey, what's up guys, Garrett here. Welcome back to another video. It's been a while, lots going on in the world with all this COVID-19 stuff. So first things first, I want to say I hope everyone is staying safe wherever you guys are from, wherever you live. I hope your families are safe. I hope you are safe. I hope you're making good choices and keeping yourself out of harm so that you can continue to learn and just be you. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to go over how you could use SQLite inside of your Flutter application. And the first question you might have is, well, Garrett, why? Why do I have to do that? I mean, I have to learn Flutter, which is already a big thing. I mean, Flutter is no joke. There's a lot to it. And then not only am I learning this new framework, Flutter, but I'm also learning this framework that uses a language that I've probably never even heard of, likely don't even know how to use, something like that, right? That's Dart, that's the language. And now you're telling me I have to learn SQL or SQLite if you didn't know SQL before. And the answer to that is no. You don't have to learn SQL. You don't have to learn SQLite. You don't have to use SQLite with Flutter. The reason you would want to do that is if you need some sort of persistence, data-wise, data persistence, even after the application is closed. So you might not need to do that. Actually, even if you need to do that, the data persistence, you might not need to use SQLite because if it's not complex data, you can use a simple key value store, in which case the shared preferences package will work just fine for you. If you don't want to do SQL anything and you want to use a NoSQL database, there are a number of NoSQL databases that you can choose from that you can use with Flutter. But if you feel more comfortable with SQL, or if your data requires it or doesn't require it, maybe it, kind of just makes sense. It's structured data. You have to do a lot of querying, a lot of joins, things like that. Not querying, but just the joins and it's structured data. Then it makes sense to use SQL, and in this case SQLite, since that's our option for Flutter. Now, if you're new to Flutter, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what does that mean? I mean, Flutter has, the provider package, so can I just use the provider package and then, it'll work, right? Well, not quite, because, well, let me show you an example. Let's say we have this app here. It's an amazing app. I don't know what it does, but it's a great app. And inside of this app, we have our widgets, right? That's what we get to see, so that makes sense. We have some assets, maybe some videos, or maybe pictures, or I don't know, whatever it is. And inside of that app as well, we have data. Well, we don't actually have the data yet because we haven't actually gotten the data yet. But we have like the space for the data. Maybe the data is user entered data, or maybe we reach out to this, API and we get some data from a server or a database, if we're using Firebase or I don't know, wherever it is, right? But the data, the space for the data, we know it's going to be there, right? So right now the data is null. It doesn't necessarily equal null, but it doesn't exist yet. So for lack of a better way of illustrating that, it's set to null. And as we use the app, the data now equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. An array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is great. Everything's working really well. Our app works beautifully. People love it. We get a lot of 5-star reviews maybe. I don't know, something like that. But what happens when we close the app? And I don't just mean, close it and come back to it. I mean, like, what happens when we really close it? Like, maybe we got to go to do something else, or we restart our phone, or whatever it is. Well, now it restarts because it was stored within that application state. So now the data is gone, and we don't want that. We want this data to be there the next time the user accesses the application. Maybe we're thinking of checking to see if the data exists, and if it doesn't, we go and pull it from the server, and if it does, then we don't have to pull it from the server. But either way, that's not ideal, right? We want the data to be there when we want it to be there. We want to be able to save data. So what do? That's where SQLite comes in. Well, any database really, but in our case, SQLite. What it allows us to do is separate the data from the application. So now we have this database that's stored on the actual device's file system, right? Because SQLite is actually just a database inside of a file. So It's a database that's stored inside of the device's file system that basically we can just access whenever we need to once the data is there. And so that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. We are going to set up a small SQLite database on our Flutter app, actually on the app that we've been kind of working with throughout these videos. And we're going to basically do the normal thing. We're going to have the ability to add a username and password or insert it, and then we'll have the ability to display it on the next page. So let's jump on over to VS Code and we'll start going. So the first thing you'll notice is this is in fact the application that we've used in the past, right? The difference here is I took some stuff away, and actually I didn't update this page yet, so we'll have to go and do that. But I took away whatever was here, the counter, and I added, this username thing, and then tab doesn't work, by the way, and then I added the password and save. And so we'll type in our username, we'll type in our password, and then we'll hit save. It'll get saved to the database, and then we'll be able to go to this page, which is the other page, and we'll be able to see what the username and what the password are, right? So let's do it. Also, the code will be up on, I'm going to write a Medium article on basically how to do this, and not just showing the code, but actually going over how to do it. So if you guys would rather actually see the Medium article or read the Medium article, go over and check that out. Link will be in the description. If you just want the code, go over. Link will be in the description as well. Also, before we get into this, I just want to mention that I have a survey for my channel that basically just lets me know how I'm doing and what you guys would like to see and if you like these videos or not. So please go over. That's also a link in the description. Check that out. Let me know how I'm doing. I really appreciate it. It would really help me out. So thank you. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to install the SQLite package. We need to make sure that we have that. Come on over here to dependencies, and we will enter SQLite right down there. That's the first thing we have to do. Now we actually don't need to be in there anymore, so we can get out of that file. That just did its thing. Awesome. Now what we need to do is we're going to create a new folder called utils. And inside of there, we will create a new file called database.dart. And now, perfect, we're inside of this file. So let's start creating the database, basically this DB provider, which is going to allow us the ability to access all of the functionality for our database that we would need without having to write it over and over again. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to import package SQLite / that. I will copy and paste this again so I don't have to retype it. And we want, where is it? Here, the API. For right now, that's going to be it, but we might have to add one more while we're going through this, not totally sure. So now what we're going to do is create a class, and we will call this DB provider. Okay? Now DB provider, the constructor is going to be like so. Or actually, next thing we're going to do is static final DB provider, and then we're going to have a database variable, and this will be equal to DB provider, like so. We're going to create one more here, static database, and this I believe comes from SQLite, and this will be set to equal, or set, this is a variable here of type database with underscore database being what we call it. The next thing we're going to do, sorry, I have like notes over here, so I have notes over here, that's why I keep looking away. we're now going to create a future which will return a database object and make it a getter, which will be database, and it will be asynchronous. Now, this is going to be something called a singleton. Now, we're not really going to be going over what a singleton is and how it works, but basically what it does in a nutshell is when you call this file, right, it's going to check to see if an instance of this file already exists. If it does, it's going to return that instance, and if it doesn't, it's going to make a new instance of this object, of this class. All right, so now that we have this being called here, let's come on down and we will actually create this method here that we're going to be using to create our database or initialize our database. So we will call it initDB. It will be an asynchronous method, and there we go. The first thing we're going to do is return await, and we will open the database, and this comes from SQLite actually. And inside of Open Database, this is basically where all the stuff that we have going on happens. So let's just really quick add a semicolon there, otherwise we'll get an error. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to join this together. We want to create the actual file that we're going to have. So we're going to call join. This will be await again, and then get database path. And we're going to call this YouTube demo.db. That's what our database is going to be called basically. And then inside of there we're going to have create, or an on create. This is an event that SQLite gives us so that every time our database is created, we can create these tables or create the associations or whatever we want to do. We can basically have the database run or be created in a certain way. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So we will have the database and the version. This is going to take a method. So we have the database and a version that is taken as the arguments to this method, right? Join also, I believe we have to have import. I think we need the path. Is it Dart path? No, it's path/path. So path/path, and that's. Remember when I said we might have to import one other thing? That's the one other thing for right now. Basically, this join method comes from the path package, so we need to basically add that in. Okay, so this is what we're going to do now. This is where the fun stuff happens as far as SQLite goes. Now, to be clear, I believe you can use the SQLite package as an ORM to be able to do all this stuff and use its methods and all that stuff. I personally don't really like doing that. And the reason I don't like doing that is, well, there's nothing wrong with doing it. In fact, it's probably a good thing. The reason that I didn't do it is because I feel very comfortable with SQL itself. And so I'm going to be putting in raw SQL. If you don't feel comfortable with SQL or you don't know SQL, then two things. Number one, it might be worthwhile for you to go and learn how to use all the methods and stuff that SQLite gives you. If you don't know SQL already, I personally would highly recommend learning SQL, not just so that you can do this, but because SQL in general is a really, really good skill to have. If you don't want to do that, there's nothing wrong with using SQLite, like the helpers that they give you, but just know that there is a really good chance that eventually you come across a time where you do need to learn SQL and you end up learning it as such. So you might as well just do it now because it will help you in the future, especially if you're going to be using a SQL database for sure. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have another await db.execute, which is a command again from SQLite, and we're going to basically have this on multiple lines here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some quotes here. Oh, whoops, I typed in the wrong thing. Some quotes here. And this is going to allow us to have a multi-line execution command, right? So we are going to have create table, and I'm going to call this table users. And then inside of users, we're going to have our username and our password. And our username is going to be of type text. I want that to be capital. It doesn't have to be capital, I don't think, but I want it to be. It'll be the primary key, which doesn't really matter for this video, but you probably want it there anyway. And then the password is also going to be text. And for right now, that's all that we want. The next thing we want to do, though, outside of this method is we want to set the version equal to 1. I don't know too much about the versions and stuff, but I believe it has to do with migration, things like that. Since I'm still in development of my app, I haven't actually done too much with versioning, but I do believe it's a big factor. The next thing that we're going to do, now that we have this this method basically created, is we're going to go and actually create our methods for using the data. So inserting it and then retrieving it. So what we're going to do now is create a new user method, and we can call this, new user. That's what it takes in. So we'll say new user, right? This will also be asynchronous, and inside of here, we will create a DB variable. And this DB variable will basically go and call database. And if you remember, we created this database thing up here, this database initializer here, so that when it calls it, it's going to go and call this, it's going to get the database, and it's going to say, again, if the database, which is this variable here, equals null, or does not equal null, then just return the instance of it, which is the instance of the database. If not, go and create the instance, which then runs this initDB method here, which actually creates our database, and then return that database, right? So that we know that we have the working database that we can use. So inside of there, we're then going to have a variable, and we'll call this res, and this will be await again, and this will be DB, which is this DB right here, and then we'll say raw insert. This again will be a multi-line thing. So we'll go like so, and we will say, insert, can't type today, it's still kind of early, insert into users here, we'll have username, and we'll have password. We'll then say values, actually I want that to be capitalized, values, and this part's kind of cool. We can just put in question marks here because this data is going to come from the new user thing, so we don't actually have the data yet. So these question marks here are basically going to be replaced by this data here. We'll say new user.username and new user.password. We get an error up here. Let's see what that's about. Too many positional arguments, but 3 found. That's because this should be an array. That's my bad. And then that goes away. Okay. So now, once we're done doing that, what we want to do is we want to return the response. And that'll be it. The next thing we want to do before we actually go and try using this is I want to just get some more line breaks in here, make it a little bit easier to read. Is we're going to need to get the user, right? We can put the user in, we need to be able to get the user out when we go to the next page. So we're going to create a future, and this future for right now, make it easy, we'll return something that is of type dynamic. We'll call it get user, sounds simple enough. It'll be asynchronous again. And then again, we need our DB, so final database, right? And then we will have the response, or we will create a variable. Do this on this bit here, which will equal DB, oh sorry, await. Also, this should be await too. Await DB dot query, and we just want to query user. Now this is going to give us the entire thing, and yes, I realize I'm using a helper here from SQLite, but we're simplifying things. We'll be able to see how to do it in kind of in two different ways. So we have that. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to say res, or if res length is equal to 0, we want to make sure that we get something back. Then return null. Otherwise, we want to create a res map, which will only basically give us the first one. So we want to say res, give us the first one, and then return that one. So long as it's not empty, so res map is not empty, then return res map, otherwise return null. You might be tempted to think, well, this should work because I'm passing in the right data, but we have to actually add something else, and that is a model, because we're not technically done yet. So what I've done here is I've created a very small model, which basically is a way to predefine the data that you're going to be passing in, or that you're going to be using, in not just in this context, but in any context in programming. So we're not going to go over writing this actual code because it's not really what this video is about. But if you go to the link in the description to my Medium post on this topic, you'll be able to find the code for this, which you can download or copy and paste, and it'll work just fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go and start using it. So let's go up here to the top, and we will import package, not that, we're going to import package, what is this called, YouTube demo / models, and then / user. So create another folder called models, make a user.dart file in there, and then copy and paste the contents of that file, which is on Medium, and then you can come back and basically just continue on. We're now going to specify that this will be of type user. Now the problem is that we're just passing in kind of like random data. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new variable and call this new DB user. And we're going to set it to user, which we now have to import, so make sure that you do that. So that should be imported here too, right? We're going to create a new user instance, or instance of a user. And this is pretty simple. It's going to be username, and this will be new. Wait, where did this come from? This was, actually I think this is just username, right? We just store it as a variable here. And then we will have password, which will now be password. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in new DB user. Let's give that a go. So username, password, we'll hit save. Nothing happens, and that's because we shouldn't have gotten any errors. That should have just worked. So now let's go to our other page, and let's go try and like get this data here. So let's somewhere up top here, let's remove this stuff. So let's now create a new variable, which will be of type map with string, and actually it'll also be a string. And then we will say this is a new user, and it'll be empty for right now. Let's create a new method, which is actually just going to be an override. So we'll say init state, right? So we have that. What we first need to do is create a future, which will be the user future, like so. And we'll say that user future is now going to be equal to a method that we're going to create called getUser. So let's go and create getUser. GetUser will be an asynchronous method, and we will say that we have a final, which is user data equals await db provider dot db dot getUser, and then we will return this here. So we're going to do something also that's not really part of this video, but it is, I think, technically the right way of doing something, and that is that we're really quickly going to create a future builder, and that basically is going to let us wait to build the stuff on the screen until the data is actually there, because otherwise we could be querying from our database, and before the query resolves, we could be returning something or showing something on the screen, and then it never gets shown because, well, we didn't wait for the right time. So let's go in really quickly, or kind of quickly, create a future builder. So we can actually get rid of all of this stuff. We're just going to go and make something from scratch. So this will be a future builder. The builder will be, or the future rather, which we want first, will be the user future. That makes sense. Add a comma there. This now will take in a method which has our callback function, which has that, and user data. Do this. Great. Okay. Now what we're going to do is type a lot of stuff, so bear with me here. We're going to be doing this based off of user data dot connection state, and then we will have a case of connection state dot none. I'll just do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I think I did a video on future builders, so this would kind of be the same as the video that I did. We will have waiting, we will have active, and I think this one is done. In all cases, actually, you know what? Tell you what we'll do. We'll just have fall through and go straight to done, make it a little bit easier. And we'll say if new user dot contains key username. So if it does not contain the key username, right, then what we want to do, where does this go? Then what we want to do is we want to set new user to be equal to map string dot from user data dot data. Okay. All right. We have an error there, but let's see if we can resolve it by doing this. We will return a column which will have some children, which will be of type widget, right? We will have text, and in this text I want this to be new user dot username. Actually, that doesn't exist, so it should be like that. And then the next one basically just be a copy off of this, except that it'll be for password, right? And then because that wants us to return something, we will say return container. Now right now, we're going to get an error. And depending on how I edit this video, you might have already seen that error. What happens is that if I type in a username like glove, and then a password such as 12345, and I hit save, that worked. That successfully is now saved in our database. But we have no way of seeing that because when we go to this page, we get an error. And the first error we get actually is that this table doesn't exist. And that's because when we were creating this, I made a mistake and called it users, and then tried to query from a table called user, which doesn't exist. So let's stop that and then rerun it. This will take a minute or something like that. And then we'll be able to get to the next error that we're going to have, and I'll show you guys how to fix that. If you try to put in the same username again, it will break and give you an error talking about a unique constraint that it violates. So just heads up, don't do that. Or if you want, you can go and uninstall it by doing this, deleting it, and then it'll basically work again. But that kind of takes a while, so just use a different username. It'll probably make more sense in the long run. I'm going to make my username love, and then I'm going to make my password 12345. So awesome, 2 users have the same password. We'll hit save. That works. Awesome. We'll go here to this page, and it worked, but we still got an error here in the console. So what's that about? Let's go over here and let's add some other stuff to this. We'll say return container. Basically right now what's happening is that we have fall through no matter the state of the connection. And so even if it is no connection or if it's waiting or whatever, it goes right through, and we don't want that. We actually want to do something different based on the connection, and what happens is that as the connection changes, it'll rerun this and then it'll show what we want to show. So let's go here to return. I actually shouldn't need a break, although for some reason in my code I have a break. But return again will be a empty container, and that's it. Let's restart the state. I'll try that again. This time I'll make my username glove8, old username I used to use, and I'll make my password again 12345. We'll hit save. We get an issue, unique constraint, and the reason we got that issue is because I accidentally just hit the button twice actually. So that's why that happened. We might have to stop this and restart it again, unfortunately. Alright, so just redid this, and now what we'll do is we will make another user called GarrettLove8. We'll make the password again 12345. We'll hit save. That works. We'll go done. Here, we don't get any errors. Now this doesn't give us the data that we want, and the reason is because in here we are returning the first user and only the first user that is in the database. So what we'll do is we will stop this. We'll go and delete our application. This will take a little bit longer to run and get onto the device, but we'll be able to now see this from start to finish and see that everything works to round out this video. Alright, so everything is now good to go. Let's make the username glove, and we'll make the password 12345 54321. We'll hit save, done. Let's go back here. We get no errors, and we can see that while it's really tiny, it did actually work. And I'll zoom in there. So Garrett, when you're editing this, note to self, zoom in there. But yeah, this works. So that is how you use SQL to basically. Oh, actually, one more thing I want to show you that this did literally work, because remember what I told you. The whole point is that even if we quit the app, we should still be able to go back and actually see the same data. And that was, remember, that was the whole point that we were trying to address here. The whole thing we were trying to achieve was when the app closes, we still need the data to be there. So let's check right now and make sure that the data is still there on the other page so that we can see that SQLite does in fact work the way that we need it to. moment of truth, and it still works. Awesome. How cool is that, guys? So if you guys need data persistence, I highly recommend going with SQLite. SQL in general is a great type of database. It's really, really awesome, really, really powerful. Highly recommend it. If you don't know SQL, I'm actually thinking about making a SQL course. So let me know down in the comments below, would you guys be interested in an entire SQL course if I made one? And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know also down in the comments how this video was. Check out the links in my description because we will have all of the code to this page or to this video. We'll have a written version of this video on Medium, and what else? Oh, the survey for my channel, which would be really, really helpful if you guys would do me a favor and fill that out. So, thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Subscribe if you like the video, and have a good one. Also, stay safe for all the COVID-19 stuff. So, see ya.